Hi, my name is Michelle Zauner, and my book, Crying in H Mart, is Dua's monthly read for April. I think I started writing Crying in H Mart in 2015. I was working a 9-to-5 job in New York, and for the first time, I felt like I had this experience that would be interesting to write about in a nonfiction essay. And I sort of needed this outlet, this new creative outlet, to feel fulfilled in my daily life after work. And it started as sort of just a cute essay, as a sort of like Korean Julie and Julia. I had discovered this YouTube vlogger named Mangchi, who would sort of keep me company after long days at work as I learned how to make these Korean dishes. And I thought it was a really sweet sort of road back to, daily life being manageable as someone that was coping with grief in this very heavy way. And that essay became something called Love, Loss, and Kimchi, and it won Glamour magazine's Essay of the Year, I think in 2016. And that was the sort of beginning of the process of getting that down to fit into like a tiny women's magazine. Really revealed to me that there was so much more to say, and there's so much more freedom that I needed to kind of express what I wanted to fully. But around that same time, my music career was starting to take off a little bit in an indie way. And I sort of put that on pause, but it was always on the back of my mind. And then in 2017, my band played, we did a tour in Asia, and I stayed in Seoul for 6 weeks and started working on what I thought could be a book. And I wrote the first 6 chapters of Crying in H Mart pretty messily. And then I got an offer to submit a piece for The New Yorker, and I cleaned up the first chapter and submitted that, and it received such a warm response that shortly after I got an agent and a book deal and was sort of able to start work on the book in earnest. So it was kind of on and off a writing process of like 5 to 6 years in various stages. But a lot of it was also written sort of like on tour in between shows, between sound check and showtime, in vans or on planes and in green rooms. So there was a lot of haphazard writing that was kind of happening in different stages. I felt for me that the best way to go about writing it once I knew it was going to be a book was once my editor told me that they would like to receive 90,000 words. And I sort of came back to earth and realized what that entailed. I decided the best way to approach it was to write 1,000 words every single day until I reached that, and sort of just write without, with abandon, and not look back until I hit that word count. And so I think that was a really great structure for me to have every day. I was able to sort of write, much more freely, knowing that, I just had to like hit this limit. It was okay if it was bad. But I think that the real work sort of came in, as most writers, I'm sure, will say, like during the editing process and sort of sifting through all of that raw material. But yeah, I mean, I think that if you read the first draft that I submitted to my editor, I mean, it's a completely different book. I mean, it took so many turns that it really didn't need to initially. And it was also a very angry book. When I was talking to Dua about, learning to sort of empathize with the people in your life that you begin writing about, I mean, that was a big part of it. Was I didn't even realize how angry I was at my father, how angry I was at Kay, how angry I was at myself, until I read back what I had wrote. And what's so wonderful about writing a book is that there's so much time that's built in to create perspective, which I think is the key to making great art, is for me what was really, really a profound realization in this process that I don't really do as a musician, is to write something completely to the best of your ability, send it off to someone and completely forget about it for 2 to 3 months, and then to return to it with these very thoughtful notes from someone that you respect and admire greatly, but also with 3 months of perspective, where the things that you held on to and thought were so important to the story suddenly reveal themselves to be not so important, or the details that you thought were great, or the the anecdotes you thought were funny or maybe not so funny. So I think time is the greatest sort of assistant to like discovering what material is good and what's not working, and doing that over and over again as much as you can until you lose perspective completely is the sort of ticket. I learned a lot from being a musician. I mean, I think it gave me such a false sense of confidence when it came to writing this book, where I felt like I had overseen a large creative project and a number of records that I've made. So I felt like, how different could a book sort of be? And I think even in the way that I approached like the chapter titles and piecing the book together was sort of reminiscent of the way that I put together an album. It felt sort of lyrical to me, and there were certainly a lot of borrowed lyrics that were kind of feelings or concepts or ideas that I felt I had gotten right the first time, distilled into like a short sentence that I could then steal from and put into book form. But yeah, I think that in general, I mean, my relationship to music is much more intuitive and freer than it is in writing. I don't go through that process quite as much, and maybe my music has suffered as a result, but I think I need music to be a little bit more freer and more impressionistic. And I also love to write in fragments. And so in music, you're really free to do that. And there's a lot more room for interpretation. Whereas like, especially in nonfiction, you have to really know how to share and convey what exactly is going on and what you want people to feel. I think that I have a hunch, and maybe other people can relate to this, but I have a hunch that I'm messier than other writers. I feel like what my like image of other writers is very meticulous and considered, and I think I'm a bit sloppier, and maybe that comes from being a musician, where I think it's a little. I like to write very freely and very sloppily, and then send it off to an editor and forget about it, and have them leave them with very, very low expectations, so that when the revision happens, they're pleasantly surprised. That feels very, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm thinking too highly of other writers, but to me, that's maybe something that feels unique to me.